Marcus Chen stood outside the weathered apartment building, his hands trembling as he clutched the address his private investigator had given him. The November rain soaked through his expensive wool coat, but he barely noticed. His entire world had shattered 3 hours ago when he'd overheard 2 women at his company's anniversary gala talking about a woman named Victoria Walsh, who'd given birth alone at Mercy General Hospital. Victoria Walsh, his ex-wife, the woman he'd divorced 8 months ago in a fog of anger and wounded pride. The timing made his blood run cold. 8 months since the divorce, 9 months for a pregnancy. Marcus had spent those months building his commercial real estate empire, closing deals worth hundreds of millions, becoming the youngest CEO in his firm's history. The press called him brilliant. His investors called him fearless. But standing in the rain outside this rundown building in a neighborhood he'd never visited, he felt like the biggest fool who'd ever lived. He climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, his Italian leather shoes squeaking on the worn linoleum. Apartment 2C. The door was painted a faded blue, and he could hear soft music playing inside, one of those gentle lullaby melodies. His heart hammered against his ribs as he raised his fist and knocked. The music stopped. Footsteps approached, hesitant and light. "Who is it?" Victoria's voice came through the door, cautious and exhausted in a way that made his chest ache. "It's Marcus." His voice cracked. "Please, Vic, I need to talk to you." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Then he heard a baby cry, a thin, reedy sound that pierced straight through him. He heard Victoria's soft murmuring, soothing sounds he'd never heard her make before. When the door finally opened, Marcus forgot how to breathe. Victoria stood there in an oversized sweater and yoga pants, her copper-red hair pulled into a messy knot. She'd always been slender, but now she looked almost fragile, with dark circles under her green eyes and a pallor that spoke of sleepless nights and skipped meals. But cradled in her arms was a tiny infant with a downy cap of dark hair and skin the color of warm honey, a perfect blend of both of them. "How did you find me?" Victoria's voice was flat, carefully controlled, but he could see the way her arms tightened protectively around the baby. "I heard people talking at the gala about a woman named Victoria Walsh who gave birth alone at Mercy General." Marcus's eyes were locked on the infant, drinking in every detail, the tiny fists, the button nose, the way her little mouth worked, even in sleep. "I had to know if it was you. If she was mine," Victoria's jaw clenched. For a moment, he thought she'd slam the door in his face. Instead, she stepped back. "You should come inside." But quietly, "I just got her down." The apartment was smaller than his walk-in closet, but it was filled with Victoria's warmth. Her paintings covered every available wall space, vibrant cityscapes and abstract pieces in the bold colors she'd always loved. A second-hand bassinet sat in the corner, surrounded by carefully organized baby supplies. An easel stood by the window with a half-finished canvas showing a sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Victoria laid the baby in the bassinet with movements so tender and practiced that Marcus felt a physical pain in his chest. How many times had she done this alone? How many nights had she walked these floors, soothing their daughter while he'd been drinking champagne and making deals? She turned to face him, crossing her arms. "Her name is Lily Rose Walsh. She's 9 days old." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were blazing. "And yes, Marcus, she's yours. Why didn't you tell me?" The words burst out of him. "Victoria, how could you not tell me you were pregnant?" Her laugh was sharp and bitter. "I tried." "God, Marcus, I tried so many times." She moved to the small kitchen counter, putting distance between them. "I called your office 14 times in the first 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I sent emails to every address I had for you. I even showed up at Chen Properties one afternoon, desperate enough to brave that glass tower you love so much." Marcus felt cold seeping into his bones. "I never got any calls. Any emails. I never knew you came by." "Of course you didn't, because your devoted assistant Jennifer made sure of it." Victoria's voice shook now, the careful control cracking. "She told me you'd given explicit instructions not to be disturbed by me. She said you wanted a clean break, that you were done with our marriage and ready to move on with someone who understood your world better." Her eyes met his, full of old hurt. She implied that someone was her. The room spun. Jennifer Moore, his assistant for 5 years. Always efficient, always anticipating his needs, always there with sympathetic looks when he'd come back from particularly brutal days. Jennifer, who'd never mentioned a single call from Victoria. Who'd screened all his messages during those frantic months after the divorce when he'd thrown himself into work to avoid thinking about what he'd lost. "I never said that," Marcus whispered. "Victoria, I swear to you, I never gave those instructions. 3 months after you left, I tried to call you. Your number was disconnected. I thought—" He stopped, his throat tight. "I thought you wanted nothing to do with me." I couldn't afford the phone plan anymore. Victoria's voice was quiet now, drained of anger, leaving only exhaustion. "I lost my job at the West Side Gallery 2 months into the pregnancy. The morning sickness was so severe I couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes without getting dizzy. They let me go, politely, of course. Budget cuts, they said." Marcus looked around the apartment with new eyes. The furniture was old, some of it clearly salvaged or donated. There was no television, no dishwasher, no microwave. A stack of bills sat on the counter, and he could see the red, overdue stamps from where he stood. While he'd been closing a $50 million deal last month, Victoria had been here, pregnant and alone, struggling to keep the lights on. "I had some savings," Victoria continued, staring down at her hands. "But they disappeared fast between rent and prenatal care. I moved here because it was all I could afford. I sold almost everything I owned except my art supplies and some clothes." She gestured to the paintings on the walls. "I've been trying to sell pieces online, but it's slow. Maternity leave doesn't exist when you're unemployed." Marcus felt like someone had reached into his chest and crushed his heart. "The medical bills. The birth. How did you—" "Medicaid. The social worker at the hospital helped me apply when I showed up for my first appointment with no insurance." Victoria's cheeks flushed with shame she shouldn't have had to feel. "I had Lily at Mercy General because it was the only hospital that would take me. I was in labor for 16 hours with only the nurses for company. When they finally placed her in my arms, I was so happy and so terrified and so alone. The image of Victoria going through labor by herself, bringing their daughter into the world without anyone to hold her hand or tell her she was doing great, made Marcus want to put his fist through a wall. But that would wake the baby, and he'd already caused enough damage. "Jennifer intercepted everything," he said, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "She's been positioning herself as more than an assistant for months." I was too busy, too focused on work, too blind to see it. "Victoria, I never knew you were trying to reach me. If I had known about Lily, about any of this, would you have been there, though?" Victoria cut him off, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Really, Marcus? Because the man I married chose a conference call with investors over our anniversary dinner. That man accused me of being paranoid and controlling when I asked if there was something between him and his business partner. Diane, that man made me feel invisible every single day for the last year of our marriage." Each accusation landed like a physical blow, and Marcus knew he deserved everyone. She was right. He'd been that man, the one who checked his phone during intimate dinners, who canceled date nights for emergency meetings that could have waited, who made Victoria feel like she was competing with his career and losing. Their last night together played in his mind with brutal clarity. He'd promised to be home by 6 for their anniversary. Victoria had spent all day cooking his favorite meal, lighting candles, choosing the perfect wine. She'd been wearing the green dress he loved, the one that brought out her eyes. And he'd shown up at 11:30, reeking of the bourbon he'd been drinking with clients, barely remembering to grab the flowers from the bodega on the corner. She'd been sitting at the table in the dark. The food cold, the candles burned down to nubs. He could still see her face when he'd walked in, not angry, just devastated. And then his phone had rung. Diane calling about the Patterson deal. He'd answered it despite Victoria's pleading eyes, despite her quiet, "Please, Marcus, not tonight." He'd taken that call. He'd laughed at Diane's jokes, used their inside references, talked for 20 minutes while Victoria sat there, becoming smaller and smaller with each passing moment. When Victoria had finally asked, voice barely above a whisper, if there was something between him and Diane, something explosive had erupted in Marcus. Not because he had feelings for Diane, he didn't, but because he felt guilty. Guilty for all the times he'd chosen work over his wife. Guilty for letting his business partner know him better than the woman he'd vowed to love forever. So he'd lashed out. Called Victoria insecure. Told her she didn't understand the pressure he was under. Accused her of trying to sabotage his career with her jealousy. She hadn't yelled back. Hadn't thrown things or made scenes. She'd just looked at him with those green eyes full of heartbreak and said, "I can't be married to someone who makes me feel like I don't exist anymore." She'd left that night, staying with her sister. 2 weeks later, divorce papers had arrived at his office. Marcus had signed them in a fit of wounded pride, convincing himself that if she wanted to give up so easily, they weren't meant to last, standing in her tiny apartment now, looking at the woman who'd borne his child alone because of his failures. Marcus felt shame so deep it was almost suffocating. "You're right," he said quietly. "I was that man. I failed you in every way that mattered." Victoria wiped at her eyes angrily. "So why are you here now, Marcus? What do you want from me? From us?" "I want to be her father." The words came out raw and honest. "I want to be there for every moment I've already missed. I want to help you, support you. I want—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I want a chance to prove I'm not that man anymore." "People don't change," Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not, but I have to try." Marcus took a tentative step closer. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to let me back into your life. But Lily deserves to know her father. And you deserve help, Victoria. Real help, not just words." Before Victoria could respond, Lily began to fuss in her bassinet, the small sounds quickly escalating to full cries. Victoria moved to pick her up, but Marcus found himself stepping forward instinctively. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the baby's wailing. Victoria hesitated, then nodded slowly. Marcus reached into the bassinet with shaking hands and lifted his daughter for the first time. She was so small, so impossibly light, and she fit perfectly in the crook of his arm. Lily's cries quieted as she blinked up at him with dark eyes that were all Victoria. Something fundamental shifted inside Marcus's chest. This was his daughter, his child, and he'd missed the first 9 days of her life because of his own blindness and someone else's malice. "I'm so sorry, little one," he whispered, his voice thick. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." Victoria watched them, her expression unreadable. When Lily started rooting against Marcus's chest, searching for food she wouldn't find, Victoria gently took her back. "She's hungry," Victoria said, moving toward the small couch. "You should probably go. Please." Marcus's voice cracked. "Let me stay. Let me help. I can go get whatever you need, groceries, diapers, anything. Just give me a list." "I don't need your money, Marcus. This isn't about money. This is about our daughter. About making sure you both have everything you need." He pulled out his wallet and set every credit card he had on the counter. "I know you won't take cash, but please, use these for whatever Lily needs. Formula, clothes, medical bills, anything." Victoria stared at the cards as she settled into the couch to nurse Lily. "I can't accept this. It's not for you. It's for her. She's my responsibility too, Victoria. Let me do at least this much." Marcus felt desperate, helpless in a way he'd never experienced in the boardroom. "Please!" The silence stretched between them, broken only by Lily's soft nursing sounds. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice tired and resigned. "Fine. But this doesn't change anything between us. You can help with Lily, but you and we're done, Marcus. That door closed 8 months ago." The words hurt more than he'd expected, but Marcus nodded. "I understand. Can I come back tomorrow? To see her again?" Victoria considered this, her hand cradling Lily's head with infinite gentleness. "Tomorrow evening, around 6. But Marcus, if you're going to be in her life, you need to be consistent. I won't let you drift in and out when it's convenient. She deserves better than that." "I'll be here," Marcus promised. "Every day, if you'll let me." "I meant what I said, Vic. I'm not walking away from my daughter. Or from you. No matter how long it takes to earn back your trust." Victoria didn't respond, her attention focused on Lily. Marcus watched them for a moment longer. His family, fractured by his own mistakes, then quietly let himself out of the apartment. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflecting the streetlights. Marcus sat in his car for a long time, his hands gripping the steering wheel, Lily's face imprinted on his mind. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Jennifer, it's Marcus. I need you to come to the office first thing tomorrow morning. We need to talk." He hung up before she could respond. Tomorrow, he'd start fixing the damage that had been done. Tonight, he'd begin figuring out how to be the father his daughter needed, and the man Victoria had deserved all along. Marcus arrived at Chen Properties at dawn, hours before anyone else. He'd spent the entire night awake, going through email logs, phone records, and security footage. What he found made his blood boil. Jennifer Moore had systematically erased every trace of Victoria's attempts to contact him. Deleted emails, redirected calls. She'd even intercepted a package, probably containing ultrasound photos or a letter that had been delivered to the office 4 months ago. The security footage showed her taking it and walking out with it at the end of the day. When Jennifer arrived at 8:30, perfectly put together in a tailored suit, she found Marcus waiting in his office with a banker's box and a security guard. "Marcus, you're here early," she said, smiling that professional smile he'd once appreciated. "I thought we could grab breakfast before the day starts. We need to discuss—" "Sit down, Jennifer." Something in his tone made her face go pale. She sat, smoothing her skirt nervously. Marcus slid a folder across the desk. "These are printouts of every email, every call, and every visit from Victoria Walsh that you intercepted over the past 8 months. I've also included the security footage of you removing a package addressed to me from the mailroom on July 15th. Jennifer opened the folder, and the color drained completely from her face. "I could have you prosecuted for this," Marcus continued, his voice cold and controlled. "Tampering with mail, fraud, harassment. But I'm giving you one chance to walk away quietly. You're fired, effective immediately. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal items under security supervision. If I ever hear that you've contacted Victoria, spread rumors about this situation, or interfered in my life in any way, I will pursue every legal avenue available to me. Do you understand?" "Marcus, please!" Jennifer's voice shook. "I only did it because I care about you. Victoria was holding you back. She didn't understand your potential. You thought you could manipulate your way into my life by destroying my marriage." Marcus stood, his hands flat on the desk. "You cost me 8 months with my daughter. You left the mother of my child struggling alone while pregnant. There is no excuse, no justification that makes any of that acceptable." Jennifer's expression shifted from pleading to bitter. "You think she's going to take you back? You think playing devoted father will fix what you broke? Victoria will never forgive you, Marcus. She'll take your money and your help, and she'll still hate you for what you did to her." "Get out of my building," Marcus said quietly, "before I change my mind about being generous." The security guard escorted a seething Jennifer from the office. Marcus watched her go, feeling no satisfaction, only a hollow sense of justice served too late. His second call was to his lawyer, instructing him to file all necessary paperwork to establish paternity and set up a trust fund for Lily. Then he called his accountant and arranged for a substantial monthly payment to be deposited into an account in Victoria's name for child support, far more than any court would have mandated. By noon, he'd reorganized his schedule for the next 6 months, delegating major projects and clearing his evenings. His board members were confused by the sudden change in priorities, but Marcus didn't care. He'd spent years chasing success at the expense of everything else. That stopped now. At 5:30, he left the office with bags from a baby boutique, practical things like onesies, diapers, and bottles, along with a few indulgences like a soft stuffed bunny and a mobile with stars that glowed in the dark. He also stopped at a grocery store, filling his cart with fresh produce, proteins, and easy-to-prepare meals for Victoria. When he knocked on her door at 6 sharp, Victoria answered, looking slightly less exhausted than the night before. She'd showered and changed into clean clothes, and her hair was down around her shoulders the way he remembered. "You came," she said, sounding surprised. "I said I would." Marcus held up the bags. "I brought some things. I wasn't sure what you needed, so I got a variety. Victoria stepped back to let him in. Lily was awake in her bassinet, making small cooing sounds. Marcus set the bags down and immediately went to her, unable to help himself. "Hey, little one," he murmured, picking her up carefully. "Did you have a good day?" "She slept for 4 hours straight this afternoon," Victoria said, unpacking the bags. Her eyes widened at the groceries. "Marcus, this is too much." "It's not enough." He bounced Lily gently, marveling at how alert she seemed. "I also set up a monthly deposit for child support. My lawyer will contact you with the details." Victoria's face flushed. "I told you I don't want your money. And I told you this isn't about what you want. It's about what Lily needs." Marcus kept his voice gentle. "You shouldn't have to choose between eating properly and keeping the lights on. You shouldn't have to sell your art supplies to buy diapers. Let me do this, Victoria. It's the least I can do." They stared at each other, the tension thick between them. Finally, Victoria looked away. "Fine, but I'm keeping track of every penny. When she's older, I'll make sure she knows you supported her. I don't care about credit. I just want to help." Marcus sat on the couch with Lily, who was studying his face with intense concentration. "Can I ask you something?" "About the pregnancy?" Victoria tensed but nodded. "When did you find out?" She was quiet for a moment, organizing the groceries in her small kitchen. 2 days after the divorce was finalized. I'd been feeling off for a couple weeks, but I thought it was stress. My sister Rebecca convinced me to take a test. She paused, her hands stilling on a box of pasta. I stared at those 2 lines for an hour, trying to figure out what to do. "You must have been terrified. Terrified doesn't begin to cover it. I just lost my husband, my home, my stability, and suddenly I was going to be responsible for a whole other person." Victoria turned to face him, leaning against the counter. But I also felt this weird sense of hope. Like maybe this baby was a chance to build something good out of all the pain. "I wish I'd been there," Marcus said quietly. "Tell me about it." "The pregnancy, the birth, all of it. I want to know everything I missed." Victoria studied him for a long moment, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Then, slowly, she began to talk. She told him about the morning sickness that had lasted well into her 2nd trimester. So severe she'd lost 15 pounds before she finally started keeping food down. About the moment at 18 weeks when she'd felt Lily kick for the first time and had cried for an hour because she had no one to share it with. About the anatomy scan where they'd discovered she was having a girl, and how she'd bought a single pink onesie on sale that she'd kept tucked under her pillow. She told him about the financial stress, the mounting bills, the fear that kept her up at night wondering if she'd be able to provide for her child, about selling her grandmother's jewelry, the only valuable thing she owned, to cover her 3rd trimester checkups, about the shame of applying for government assistance, standing in lines at the welfare office with her swollen belly and knowing she'd once lived in a penthouse. Marcus listened, holding Lily close, feeling each story like a physical wound. This was what his pride had cost, not just his own happiness, but Victoria's well-being and security during the most vulnerable time of her life. "The labor was the worst," Victoria continued, her voice softer now. "It started at 3 in the morning. I called my sister, but she was 4 hours away and had her own kids to worry about. So I drove myself to the hospital, timing contractions at red lights." "Jesus, Victoria!" "The nurses were amazing," she said quickly. "One of them, Caroline, stayed with me even after her shift ended. She held my hand and told me I was strong and that I could do this. When Lily finally came, when they put her on my chest, I forgot everything else. All the pain, all the fear. It just disappeared. She was perfect, Marcus. So perfect." Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. "I'm so sorry." "God, Victoria, I'm so sorry for all of it." "Sorry doesn't change what happened." "I know, but I need you to understand. If I had known, nothing would have kept me away. Not work, not pride, nothing." He looked down at Lily, who had fallen asleep in his arms. "She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "She has your nose," Victoria said, a hint of a smile touching her lips. "And your stubborn personality. She won't sleep unless someone's holding her." Smart girl. "Why sleep alone when you can be in someone's arms?" They lapsed into silence, but it felt different now, less hostile, more carefully neutral. Marcus stayed until after 8, helping with Lily's evening routine. He changed his first diaper, which Victoria found hilarious when he gagged at the smell. He learned how to swaddle her properly, though his first 3 attempts resulted in Lily breaking free within seconds. "You'll get better with practice," Victoria said. "Demonstrating the proper technique. I plan to get a lot of practice." Marcus watched her work, efficient and gentle. "Can I come back tomorrow?" Victoria hesitated. "You have a company to run," I delegated. "My evenings are free now." He met her eyes. "I meant what I said, Victoria. I'm going to be here for her. Every day if you'll let me." "We'll see how long that lasts," she said, but there was less bite in her words than before. Marcus left reluctantly, already planning his return. As he drove home through the city lights, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Purpose that had nothing to do with closing deals or building empires. The next 6 weeks fell into a rhythm. Marcus came every evening at 6, bearing groceries and baby supplies Victoria was too proud to ask for, but too practical to refuse. He learned to feed Lily bottles of pumped milk, to soothe her when she cried, to read her cues. He sat with Victoria during the endless evening fussy periods, both of them walking the small apartment with a crying baby, exhausted and bonding over shared misery. Slowly, Victoria began to soften. She started telling him about her days, the small victories and frustrations of new motherhood. She showed him her art, the paintings she was working on in Lily's brief nap windows. Marcus commissioned several pieces for Chen Properties, paying her far more than market rate despite her protests. "I'm not accepting charity," Victoria had argued. "It's not charity. It's business. These pieces are beautiful, and they'll look perfect in our main lobby. I'm paying standard corporate art rates. These are not standard corporate art rates. These are I feel guilty rates. Fine, I feel guilty. But I also genuinely love your work, and I want to support you as an artist. Can't both things be true?" Victoria had eventually accepted, and the money had allowed her to pay off her medical bills and build a small savings cushion. Marcus had also quietly paid her rent for the next 6 months, though he'd made it look like it came from a housing assistance grant his lawyer had fabricated. They didn't talk about their past much. Both of them focused on the present, on Lily, on getting through each day. But sometimes Marcus would catch Victoria looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between longing and pain. One evening in week 7, Marcus arrived to find Victoria in tears. Lily was screaming inconsolably and Victoria looked completely overwhelmed. "I don't know what's wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "She won't eat, won't sleep, won't stop crying. I've tried everything." Marcus took Lily gently. Her forehead felt warm to his touch. "I think she has a fever. Do you have a thermometer?" They took Lily's temperature, 101 degrees. For a 2-month-old, that meant an emergency room visit. Marcus drove them to Seattle Children's Hospital, his heart in his throat, while Victoria sat in the back seat with Lily, whispering reassurances neither of them believed. The next 8 hours were torture. Tests, waiting, more tests, more waiting. Lily was admitted for observation, and Victoria refused to leave her side. Marcus stayed too, bringing coffee and food that Victoria barely touched. He made phone calls to clear his schedule for the next several days. He dealt with the insurance paperwork and the hospital administration. At 3 in the morning, a pediatrician finally gave them good news. Just a virus, common and manageable. Lily would be fine. They could take her home in the morning. Victoria collapsed into Marcus's arms, sobbing with relief. He held her, stroking her hair, murmuring that everything was okay. And for those few moments, it felt like no time had passed at all, like they were still the couple who'd once promised forever to each other. When Victoria realized what she was doing, she pulled away quickly, wiping her eyes. "Sorry, I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize," Marcus said gently. "You've been strong for so long, Vic. You're allowed to lean on someone. Not on you. Why not me? I'm her father. He stopped himself before saying your husband, because he wasn't anymore. I'm here. That's what matters." They took Lily home the next morning, both exhausted but grateful. Marcus insisted on staying for the next few days to help, and Victoria was too tired to argue. He slept on her couch, got up for night feedings, and handled diaper changes so Victoria could rest. On the third night, after Lily had finally settled into a peaceful sleep, Victoria made tea for both of them. They sat on the couch in the quiet darkness, the only light coming from the kitchen. "Thank you," Victoria said softly, "for being here, for all of this. You don't have to thank me for being a father to my daughter. I'm not just talking about Lily." She turned to look at him. "You've changed, Marcus. The man I was married to would never have taken time off work. He would have sent money and his assistant to handle things. I fired that assistant, and yeah, I've changed. Losing you, losing everything, it forced me to look at who I'd become." He met her eyes. "I don't like what I saw. What do you see now? Someone trying to be better. Someone who realizes that all the success in the world means nothing if you have no one to share it with." He hesitated, then reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "I see someone who wants his family back, even though he knows he might not deserve that chance." Victoria's breath caught. "Marcus, I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just being honest." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I still love you, Victoria. I never stopped. And I know I destroyed what we had, but if there's even the smallest chance that someday you might—" "It's not that simple," she whispered. But she didn't let go of his hand. "I know, but I'm a patient man. I can wait." They sat like that until dawn, hands linked, the weight of their past and the uncertainty of their future suspended in the quiet hours between night and morning. And for the first time since he'd found her again, Marcus felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Hope. Marcus's best friend Owen Mitchell showed up at Victoria's apartment 3 months into Marcus's new routine, carrying pizza and wearing an expression that said he meant business. "We need to talk," Owen announced, brushing past Marcus at the door. He nodded at Victoria, who was nursing Lily on the couch. "Hey, Vic, looking good. Motherhood suits you." "Owen," Victoria said warmly. She'd always liked Marcus's childhood friend, who ran a nonprofit for at-risk youth and had never been impressed by wealth or status. "What brings you by?" "I'm staging an intervention." Owen set the pizza on the counter and turned to Marcus. "You've been tiptoeing around each other for 3 months. It's time to actually deal with what happened." Marcus tensed. "This isn't the time?" "It's never going to be the time if you keep avoiding it." Owen looked at Victoria. "I know what happened at the end of your marriage. Marcus told me everything, but I also know things about your relationship that maybe you both have forgotten." Victoria adjusted Lily's blanket, her expression guarded. "Owen, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but just hear me out. Both of you." Owen grabbed paper plates and served the pizza like this was his apartment. "I've known Marcus since we were 12 years old. I was at your wedding. I watched your relationship from the beginning, and I watched it fall apart. And there's context that neither of you seems to remember." He handed Victoria a plate, then Marcus. "You two met 5 years ago at that gallery opening, right?" Marcus was just starting Chen Properties, working 100-hour weeks trying to get the company off the ground. "Victoria, you were building your reputation as a curator, taking on every exhibition you could. You were both ambitious, both driven, both chasing your dreams." "What's your point?" Marcus asked. "My point is that for the first 2 years it worked. You supported each other's careers." Victoria would bring her laptop to Marcus's office and work while he handled late meetings. Marcus would help Victoria hang exhibits at midnight when that was the only time the gallery was available. You understood each other's ambitions because you both had them. Victoria was quiet, remembering. Owen was right. Those early years had been intense but balanced. They'd been partners in every sense. "So what changed?" Owen asked, though he clearly had his own theory. "I'll tell you what changed." Marcus's company exploded. Suddenly, he wasn't scrappy Marcus Chen trying to make it. He was Marcus Chen, CEO, with investors and board members and international deals. The pressure increased exponentially. "I know I got too focused on work," Marcus said defensively. "Let me finish." Owen held up his hand. "Because Victoria, you changed too. Your mom got sick 2 years ago, remember? Stage 3 breast cancer. You spent 6 months commuting to Portland every weekend to help care for her, dealing with doctors and treatments and watching your mom go through hell." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Her mother had beaten the cancer, but those months had been devastating. Both of you were drowning, Owen continued quietly. Marcus in work, Victoria in family crisis, and instead of reaching for each other, you both pulled away. Marcus buried himself deeper in deals because that was the only thing he felt like he could control. Victoria stopped asking for support because she didn't want to burden Marcus when he was already stressed. The silence in the apartment was heavy. Lily had finished nursing and dozed off, and Victoria carefully transferred her to the bassinet before speaking. "He forgot our anniversary," she said, her voice tight. "He promised he'd be home. I needed him that night, and he chose a phone call over me." "You're right. He did." Owen turned to Marcus, and that was inexcusable. "But Victoria, I also know something you don't." "What?" she asked warily. Owen pulled out his phone and showed her something Marcus couldn't see from his angle. "These are texts Marcus sent me that night. Look at the timestamps." Victoria read them, her expression shifting from confusion to surprise. "He texted me at 5:30 saying he was leaving the office in 30 minutes, Owen explained. "That he'd picked up flowers and your favorite wine. He was planning to get home by 6:30 early even. But then there was an emergency with the Tokyo office, not just a crisis, a genuine catastrophe. A software vulnerability that could have exposed customer data for 50,000 clients. If Marcus didn't handle it immediately, Chen Properties could have."